Are you ready?
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the podcast that functions as the arm for the newsletter for St. John Sam Prairie called the Parishscope. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Dreamus. I'm the Creative Worship Director at Our Savior Lutheran in Washington.
All right. Well, I mean, honestly, we should get to it. So I was trying to think today, and actually, I didn't mention this. We always kind of like do a powwow, like right before we start, and it's like I didn't mention this even in that, but like. You know, that whole news song story that you brought up last time that I had to investigate real quick. That thing's growing legs and really moving.
Yeah. Well, newsboys want to make sure we don't.
What did I say?
Yeah, news song, which is an easy thing to get mixed up. You know, it's kind of it seems like it's kind of the end of the newsboys.
Yeah,
like
their record company got rid of them. Like all their tour was canceled. Like
the radios have basically completely boycotted all like newsboys music.
Which it really does surprise me. I mean,
it surprises me too.
I mean, again, he did some horrible things. I don't want to make light of that. And I loved the way that they addressed it by saying, hey, you know, reach out to us. Like if, you know, this guy did you wrong kind of thing, you know, we're going to try to make it right and everything. I can appreciate that, but man, alive.
They're really going through the full force of what we call in the modern era as canceled. You know, they really are. But the thing that's surprising to me is that the newsboys have been around for, probably like 40 years or something like that.
Before this guy.
Yeah, he was there for like 15 of that. But I mean, newsboys were majorly popular long before he came along and had tons of music. And I'm kind of surprised at the idea that they're like boycotting all newsboys music. And my thought would be, well, why don't you play some of the old stuff? Like, if you're like, we don't want Michael Tate's voice on here, that's like, yeah, sure. I understand it. But they have tons of music that he's not singing on, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And almost, I mean, honestly, they could go, we'll throw in a little, for the people who've listened to the podcast from the beginning, you know, they could pull a little Taylor Swift and like re-record their albums or their greatest hits that he's been on and just record it with their new singer.
With a different singer, yeah.
And just say, okay, we get it. You don't want to listen to his voice, neither do we. But these are great songs, you know, that they can help people. I don't know. I wonder if they will make a comeback or if this is just the absolute, they're never coming back from this, you know?
You know, I also wonder if there's more to the story that I just don't know.
Yeah, you know that's also a question, yeah.
Because honestly, that's the kind of thing that was running through my mind. Like, because like everything I've read did not garner this response. Like I knew they were going to get sued. I knew that people were going to, you know, sue them for past crimes. And I expected that. Don't get me wrong. I expect that their popularity and their finances were going to take a massive hit and they might even go bankrupt. I expected all of that. But for them to get canceled like this, that I didn't see coming. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I didn't really see it either. And I think the question, like for me is that, you know, the story is that they had no idea. And you have to kind of ask the question, did they really not know or did they kind of have an idea?
Yeah.
Because there is a little bit of that questioning of like, you know, just because that's the story that's being published doesn't mean that's what actually happened. And as I've talked about it before, that's just the music industry is such a rough place. There's a lot of nasty, disgusting things happening in the music industry. Mm-hmm. And so if they're saying, oh, we had no idea, there's a part of me that's like, I feel like you probably had some idea.
Yeah.
But maybe not. I mean, I'm not saying I'm accusing them of that, but with how extreme this response is, there's kind of a part of me that wonders if there's radio stations where people are like, oh, those guys knew, you know, like they would have more of an inside scoop. Some of them might know, like maybe they kind of knew something about it, you know?
But yeah. I don't know, but anyway, it's just kind of, it has been really interesting to kind of watch that story develop, and then, kind of really, so here's kind of another question to ask, like, so pastors are held to extremely high standard, should live
Yes.
life above reproach, and all these kind of things. Um, and to be honest with you, like, so that kind of comes into this as well. Not that they are pastors, they're not, but the question then becomes, like, as kind of these, I don't even want to call them worship leaders,
Right.
but
Well, they're not.
I think that's kind of the way they're viewed, though. And I think that's kind of the question that's kind of I'm posing, like, if they were worship leaders, then maybe we might have something, like, because again, if there's questions about whether or not they knew, then all of a sudden you're gonna have, like, this whole, like, life above reproach and all this kind of stuff. And again, not saying that they're pastors. I personally believe that that's something that should only be, held to pastors and other, like, major church workers, maybe like a deacon or a deaconess. But
Yeah.
I don't know, the guy that plays music, I don't quite see that.
Yeah,
You know,
I get what you mean. And what's interesting is I can't remember the guy's name. I feel like Eric is his first name. I might be wrong, but there's been these reels that have been going around social media now ever
okay,
since this thing. And you can tell they're all recorded probably in the 90s, maybe even like the late 80s. And it's this guy, and I don't know if he's an artist. I don't know if he's a producer, but I've seen like 20 of these already, and he's talking at like Christian conventions or Christian like music conventions or different things, and he's basically warning people, saying, you don't understand that these people are not ministers, and you guys are expecting them to come out and give a big sermon in their concert because that's what you want them to do, and that's really dangerous because they're not, that's not what they are. They're musicians.
yeah,
And I mean, it's so crazy to see these videos because they're 50, 40 years old, or 30 years old, whatever. And he's like, flat out, everything he's saying is like exactly what this whole Newsboys situation is
yeah,
that, just because someone's in a Christian band doesn't mean that they necessarily live their life as a perfect Christian or
yeah,
even a Christian at all.
yeah,
So when you look up to those people and think, well, they're perfect, it's, it's not really a good way to look at it. And then when they fall, it's like this Newsboys thing. It's like, oh my gosh, we just can't believe we're all so heartbroken. It's like, well, they never really said they were pastors.
no,
And,
no,
and so you have to kind of take what they do with a grain of salt.
yeah.
Um,
Well, and you
it,
gotta, I mean, you gotta listen to the words of their song, and you gotta, evaluate. I mean, I suggest all of that for sure. And they might be really gifted in that, really gifted in the musical elements, really gifted in choosing the right songs, or not even just choosing, but writing good songs and the like. But that
mhm.
being said, again, at the end of the day, you're right, they're not pastors. And yeah, I think the more people we try to uphold on that regard, the more problematic things can become.
Yeah. Well, I think it's getting your wires crossed. It's just you're viewing them through a different lens, and not that, I mean, as Christians, we all are trying to live up to a standard that's impossible, but um, it's to expect them to be a pastor is just not really realistic. You know, um, and there's a lot of, like, I've played at a few really gigantic churches, and it's ironic because you go in and during Sunday school we're practicing, sometimes,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
whatever it may be, and then when the sermon's going on, a lot of times we're like in the back because the way these mega churches are, it's like the musicians aren't even really listening to the message. So it's like some of these mega churches, and they build sometimes these artists out of these mega churches that
Oh yeah,
become famous. And a lot of times they don't really partake in almost any of the actual part of church besides they get up on the stage, they practice, and then they perform, and then they go. And that's not true of like every church, of course,
sure,
but
sure.
it's just kind of understanding that they may not really be any more equipped to lead you in your walk with God than the person sitting next to you. Just because they have a microphone doesn't mean they understand that stuff.
Yeah,
And
and I mean, I think I want to separate, some of the other differences as well, because again, I don't want to just pick on like musicians, for instance, or something like that. I mean, you got to
right,
realize, like, as a pastor, my job has several different layers, and it kind of goes with that layers, like, right, like, it's not just, if it was just me getting up on Sunday morning to give a sermon, we might be talking differently, but we're not talking
right.
about that. We're talking about the sermon, the Bible class. We're talking about those times whenever you just need somebody to listen and wrestle with the Word of God with you, to come alongside you and to do those kind of things. And it's like, these are all the things that as a pastor I've been, equipped to do. And some of them, I'll be honest, I wasn't equipped and just kind of learned along the way, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason that, the scriptures kind of say, hey, as a pastor, you should have, this kind of life, versus a musician. Again, a musician
Mm-hmm.
doesn't include all that. Now, I think that a musician should be held to the standard of having sound lyrics. If they're going to be played in worship, or they're going to have worshipful music, then yeah, their music needs to have some form of a theological basis. So I think they
Yeah.
need to have that. But again, even with that, a musician can work with a pastor for something along those lines.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's just one of those things. Like, I don't want to make it sound like, because I fear the other side of it, which is where I go, well, the pastors are so awesome, great, and it's like,
Yeah.
that's not it either. That's not it either. It's just everything that's tied into the role of the pastoral office, that as pastors we've been called to do, as shepherds of the flock, so to speak. God's, kind of shepherds of the flock. That's what the word pastor means. It means shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually God's flock, and all we're doing is basically acting as a mouthpiece of Christ. And with that, though, part of our goal is to not get in the way, and that's ultimately what it does. Is, if we have a life that is less than our very open and public sin, and it's less than, then what ultimately happens is we end up getting in the way, and people fail to see Jesus or hear Jesus because they're too busy, dealing with the horrible thing that I just did, or whatever, whatever it happens to be,
Right.
you know. So anyway,
Well,
that actually go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean.
well, no, I think it definitely is bringing us back to the point of, like, with the Michael Tate stuff, is just that if you're putting someone on a pedestal, even a pastor,
It's true.
you're a human being. You have,
Yeah.
you have struggles. Not that I know of one, just me, but
Not
it's
me.
just
I'm a pastor. I have no struggles.
that's right. But we've talked about this before, that it comes down to, like, people who they have their faith in the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Of, like, if they're like, you know what, I was a Christian, but then when I heard about Michael Tate and the horrible things he did, I just couldn't understand how God could allow that. And it's like, no, you're putting your faith in a singer.
Yeah.
You're not actually putting your faith in God. We are all sinners. We all make mistakes. And that's not saying what he did's okay, but it's that if you expected him to be perfect, you're way off basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that is not going to ever be true. He's not perfect.
Yeah.
And, neither is any pastor you've met or anybody who works in a church. Like, we're all, it's funny when I
Yeah.
see people online commenting, like, I just can't stand the church because they're all hypocrites. And I'm like, have you been to a church? Because we all agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
We're not claiming any other thing
Yeah.
than that. And
I think that's part of, though, what troubles me with this whole thing. And again, please realize, guys, maybe there's something I don't know. I mean, again, I've read a few stories on
right.
this. I have not been, like, doing extensive, exhaustive research, but like Michael Tate is gone. Like, he's out.
Yeah.
Like, that makes sense to me, right? He's the one that has the very public sin, the very awful sin that everybody's staring at. Okay, he's going away to rehab. He's trying to get help. He's going to get sued to the nines for sure. But the rest of the band, again, if they can prove that they knew about it, then yeah, okay, we got something. But if they can't, then I feel like it's the band is to some degree unjustly being, pulled down by this.
Yeah.
Especially when they seem to be very, open and repentant and transparent about it. Again, maybe I don't know. That's why I keep coming back to like, is there something I don't know?
Right. And yeah, again, it could be, I always find it really humorous almost when a celebrity gets in a lot of trouble and then they try to make all these appearances like they're just showing up in someone's backyard barbecue. And look, they're just such a nice down to earth guy.
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
like, well, yeah, they gotta be because they're sucking up to the world right now, trying to get their clout back, but and maybe it's like, who knows, maybe it is just a giant, we're trying to save our butts, make us look as good as possible because we don't want to lose our career. You never know, maybe that's it. But until there's really evidence one way or the other, it just seems like, man, kind of harsh that they're just being completely canceled by everybody. But who knows, they might end up coming back, or they might end up doing something that gives them some sort of career still.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting because I feel like, we've talked about how, people kind of expect these singers or these bands to be like pastors or be perfect Christians. And it's funny because when I was growing up in the 90s, I feel like that wasn't so much the thought process, because now a lot of contemporary Christian music is very much, it's worship music, and back in the day, like one of my favorite bands me and my family listened to all the time in the car was a band called the W's. And
W's?
They're called the W's, and they're a Christian band, but they were kind of like a jazzy ska thing. They had horns, and they played the thing you probably would know them the best from is they played VeggieTales hired them to do the theme song for the Rumor Weed, Larry Boy and the Rumor Weed.
Okay.
So they did a couple things for for VeggieTales back in the day, but they, a lot of their songs, they had some songs that are kind of Christian based. Like there's a song called The Devil Is Bad. And then they have a song called Frank. And the song Frank is about Frank was a contractor who got up every morning. And it's just a song about a guy named Frank. It's like not any real thing to do. I mean, the lyrics are clean. There's nothing it's just like a goofy song. And that's kind of how I remember growing up, is like Christian bands would have maybe a song that was kind of like God is, something about positivity towards being a Christian. But then sometimes they just had like silly songs. Yeah. And it was more like, we're just having clean, good music for people.
Have a good time.
Yeah. And you didn't view it. I don't know. I just didn't view it as much of like, oh, they're a worship leader.
Yeah. Yeah. I could sense that. Yeah.
But I guess,
when did that start though?
The worship leader part?
Yeah. Where you started looking at them like worship leaders.
I don't know. Maybe it's when like Hillsong and those things really got popular.
It might be.
Maybe because then I think people.
Hillsong's out of Australia, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And maybe I don't know, because I remember my mom brought this up a few times to me that she was at a Michael W. Smith concert, and he said like at the concert they did like one worship song, and then he said, gosh, I wish I could just come and do a whole concert of just worship music, and then that kind of shifted into like. After that, it seemed like every artist just started doing worship music. They weren't really writing, clean songs for Christians. It was like, now we're doing worship songs. Yeah.
And I don't think that was necessarily a good shift. Now, don't get me wrong. We need good worship music. But I don't know. Like we're running out of just good songs to listen to.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, there also comes that point of like, I mean, we should be thinking about God in our lives a lot.
Well, sure.
But I also, it's almost like every time you listen to music, you have to be doing worship. I don't know if that's, I don't know if that, as a pastor, what do you think of that?
See, but here's the thing, and here's my, and this is like not necessarily your standard pastor approach or whatever you want to say, but like
Right.
I remember when I was growing up, and I think I've told this before in some way, but like I remember when I was growing up, one of the problems that I really had was that like all the Christian music was just so happy and chipper. And,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah, I know we've talked about this before, but this,
Yeah.
again, this was part of the problem. Like as an emotional teen, going through high school and everything didn't go right and everything didn't go great and perfect.
Yeah.
It was like there was hardly any music in the Christian sphere that really captured any of that angst or any of that emotion or, even the power of the emotion that comes with those, those years. And it was like, all the music just sounded so fake to me. And
Yeah.
that's, and I never could, really get past that. Now I will say that there's a lot of music out there now that does kind of cross that threshold. That does do a lot better job with that. But that
and
was
it's
always my
funny.
thing.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I feel like at least after probably like when I was in high school towards like probably, midway through college or something, I felt like Christian music was very depressing.
Yeah.
It got shifted over away from the everything's happy, everything's great to like every song is about drowning in a flood. Every song is about having, my life is in shambles, but I'll still follow you, God.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, but I mean, think about it. You're talking about drowning in a flood, like Jars of Clay, right?
Yeah.
And that was like what, mid to late 90s, something like that came out. And that was actually a popular song. Like that actually crossed into the mainstream, not just Christian music, but actual mainstream with Jars of Clay. And to be honest though, like, see, there you go. You have like these guys singing these very, very emotional and somewhat dark lyrics, and it crossed over. So did POD, like Youth of the Nation.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
like that was a very powerful song for the moment and for the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you think of some of these. So I only got like a sporadic few, but those are also all the ones that crossed over into the mainstream. Like the ones that didn't cross over were like Happy Sunshine Bill. Like
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess I didn't really follow it really much after that. So what you're saying is it kind of shifted and almost got depressing and kind of sad. So I don't remember that at all. So
I feel like we're now at a time where it's sort of coming back to like maybe a middle ground.
Okay.
One of the big artists right now, his name's Brandon Lake. I don't know if you've heard that name.
Yeah.
So he's a PK.
Okay.
But he's interesting because his big song that a lot of people know is the song Praise. And one of them 7-Eleven songs.
Sure.
But it's a really kind of upbeat and fun song. And I feel like we're kind of getting to a point where we're sort of shifting into like we can have something that's maybe a little more just catchy, fun, like positive. And then he also, of course, has songs that are more depressing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked. I think I've brought this up on this before, but he is starting to do a lot of stuff with the country artist Jelly Roll.
Oh, sure.
And they've been doing a ton of stuff where like Jelly Roll is like supposed to appear somewhere, and then like at an award ceremony, and he just brings Brandon Lake with him. Like not even, I don't even know if they know he's coming. He just brings him out, and they just start playing like a worship song. They did it at like the Country Music Awards or something.
Sure.
And it's like, yeah, but Jelly Roll's like, I don't care. I'm just doing what I want.
Yeah.
and brings him on. So that's kind of cool that he's crossing over. And I think his music's great, but I also, every time I see him, I'm like, I hope people are not worshiping him.
Yeah.
Because he seems like an okay guy. But I'm also like, it doesn't mean he's perfect though. So I hope people aren't like, oh man, Brandon Lake's the greatest thing. And if they find out he had an affair or something, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't handle it because he's not perfect. And it's because he's definitely not a perfect person. It's just, it's, I don't know. It's a subject. I feel like it's just so interesting to dive into.
It really is. It really is. But another one that's interesting to dig into?
Who?
Televangelist.
those are quite interesting.
Actually, I brought this up for a reason. There is a televangelist, a very famous one that passed away today. Do you know
Oh,
who Jimmy
really?
Swaggart is?
You say James Schwaggart?
Jimmy Swaggart.
I do not.
Okay, so Jimmy Swaggart was a Pentecostal televangelist, and he was Pentecostal. He was like big time. He had like these big crusades and stuff. Like, so he kind of went out of fashion when I was still a little kid. So I don't really remember him really well. I feel like I watched a few things here and there. But he was actually, let's see here, he was cousin of Jerry Lee Lewis.
Jerry Lee Lewis?
Yeah, it was
Oh,
his cousin.
wow,
Um,
that's funny.
yeah, Swaggart had his own music that he tried to do. Supposedly got okay, but then after doing all of these big events in the '80s, evangelism crusades and he was kind of like a big time TV evangelist. And then in 1988, he was he was found to be involved with a prostitute.
Yes.
And so, of course, he repented, and all these people some people forgave him, some people didn't. They defrocked him. He was with the Assemblies of God, I'm reading. But then in 1991, he was again caught with a prostitute in California.
Oh, man, yeah. Oh,
So anyway, and it seems like he like disappeared after that for a long time, and then he kind of reappears again, doing some radio stuff. And I mean, again, and I don't know his heart. Sounds like he was still very much a Christian. At least of course that's what the news people will have you believe. But again, I have no reason not to believe that. So it is. But yeah, I guess he had a stroke on June 15th. He was found unconscious and in Louisiana. And then he died today. And a lot of people that listen to us will know Jimmy Swaggart because they'll probably remember him when he was on TV back in the day.
Yeah, so on the news.
On the news.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's just.
He was 90 years old, so it's not like super wild, but it's like.
Well, yeah. Well, it's not wild, yeah. Yeah. But I don't know. It's just the more. I don't know. I see that that kind of question a lot of people being like, well, if Christians are so great, why are they hypocrites? And it's just, even like in that situation, it's like, the guy obviously had temptations in his life. And I think also there's sort of this is why I think the music industry is so tough, because like for a lot of us, I think when you don't have temptation in front of you, it's a lot easier to not fall to it.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like such an obvious statement, but when you're making tons and tons of money and you're flying around in a private jet and you're doing all these things, it's like, when you have the ability and the time to, get with a prostitute, it's, like you have that opportunity, and it's harder to say no to it if that's something you struggle with,
I get what you're saying. I think it's hard to really comprehend because like you said, we just not, I mean, again, you look at how many people are, especially in like the music and movie industry, they're on like things like cocaine, and it's hard for me to even fathom. And some of them are like, well, they were on like a $20,000 a day habit. And it's like $20,000 a day. Like,
yeah, insane.
That's absolutely insane. I can't even grasp what it would be like to do anything in that quantity. I couldn't imagine, like I couldn't imagine getting $20,000 of a car each day. It was like, that would be insane to me.
Yeah.
And so, I could, there's no way for me to even comprehend how they can get to that point. But like you said, like if you're around it, or if it feels like it's nothing or just a part of the thing, or if, like, in Swaggart's edition, I mean, again, and I don't know. I mean, obviously he fell out of fame. He shouldn't have been a preacher. If he's going to get with a prostitute, you can't be a preacher. Sorry. And that does actually go into the biblical understanding of what is a preacher, or a pastor. So he probably shouldn't be doing that. But at the same time, it's like, I wonder how many of his, the people that worked with him, also did the same thing or did similar things,
Yeah.
or was he really just the only one? Like everybody else is living a God-pleasing life, and then there's Jimmy Swaggart going,
Yeah.
red
Yeah,
light
probably
district for
not.
me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just, I found that in the music industry that, I probably told this before about, we had a reunion concert scheduled of this band that broke up years ago. They were on tour again together.
Yeah.
2 weeks before, the whole band left because the singer was back on drugs, which he was, supposed to be like clean and everything. And it was amazing to me because I watched his manager, talk him up all day how great he was and how, you didn't do anything wrong. It's those guys, they're the worst. And it's amazing. And, I see that, like, I've seen that in this, like, even in this area, there's people who they're in a situation, like, let's say they teach at like, I'm going to get in trouble for this. Let's say they teach at like a college nearby. Yeah. And they have a lot of young musicians come through, and those musicians think that they are just the most incredible musician in the world. They look up to them, and all they do all day is tell them how amazing they are. Well, it's pretty easy to get a pretty big ego.
Yeah.
When you're constantly being praised every day by these, young adults telling you how great you are. So it's weird when you see someone, like, I've played with people. It's like, we play in the same town, man. I don't know why you're acting like you're, you like don't have the time of day for me when we're playing the same gig. And it's like, well, but they're being told every day how amazing and how smart and how genius they are by all these young people. I'm not. So I don't really have that ego.
Yeah. So there's a story, and it's a devotional that I used years and years ago. And it tells the story of a choir, and it's kind of the same boat. Like this choir, at first they got together to sing, and people were just happy they had a choir. They were just happy.
Yes.
And the director, realized real quick that if they said anything negative, the people would just leave the choir. And so she would only talk about how great they were. Well, eventually that choir director quit. And a lot of the people in the church kind of secretly came up to the new director and said, "You got to fix this. They sound awful." And everything the director did that none of the people would ever believe him. They said, no, we're fantastic. We're great. And so what she did is she brings in a tape deck, because again, this is an old devotional. And she records the choir, and then she has them listen to themselves, and they go, "Oh, wow, that really sounds bad." She goes, "Exactly." It's like, sometimes you just got to listen to yourself, because, you get it all right. Like, if you don't have a choir, you can see how people could be like, "Yeah, we're just happy to have people singing. We're just happy to have people there." But right. You got to be able to work with and correct and all those kind of fun, exciting things. So
that's an interesting thing, because it is so true. Because I've had people before in different places that I've worked at that will come up to me and be like, "You have got to fix this person, blah blah blah. They just sound terrible." And it's like, and for me, it's like, okay, what do you want me to go tell them that they suck? Is that what you want me to do? And they're like, "Well, not really." It's like, well, what is your, if you want to get up there and sing, then you come up and sing. Yeah. But it's like, it's a hard situation in those, but I get exactly what you mean, is like, you can, or what we're talking about is like, you can get kind of a big ego if you're in that situation and you don't really have a grip of reality. If you stop being, I don't know. And that's hard to do though, for some people, I think. I think I grew up like, with music. I grew up with two older brothers, and they were pretty hard on me when it came to like music, when I was young.
Yeah.
And so which, at the time I think really frustrated me, but honestly, it's probably a really, really good thing that they didn't just say you're amazing all the time.
Yeah.
Because when people would compliment me, it was like, I grew up with that, like, I don't know. It's that mindset of like, "Oh, you think you're really someone, huh?" Like kind of that snarky sort of feeling, like, you're really great, aren't you? You played a beat, good for you, So that's probably a good thing to have that reality check. Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of funny.
All right. Well, we spent a lot of time on this first section. A lot
Hey,
longer
I
than I
think,
anticipated, but that's okay.
yeah.
Did you have any questions today?
Well, you know what? It's not so much a question as in how something works in the church, but I was going to ask you, because it's been on my mind a lot lately.
Sure.
Is this may be too long of a thing, but can you give any sort of I know you've talked about before, but any, like, what was your first experience right out of seminary? Like your first job? How was that? How did that how did that feel for you? And, like, did you feel like you had a support system? Did you feel like you were kind of drowning the whole time in a flood, or were you, I don't know. I'm just kind of interested. I know that's a very broad question, but I'm interested in sort of the young Chris coming out of seminary, very green,
Oh,
learning all this stuff for the first time. Is that too broad?
I mean, I guess, yeah, I would try to get you a little bit more specific. Like you asked for a job, like what was my first job? Like, so what my first parish was, right?
Sure. Yeah.
St. Mark's in Wausau, Wisconsin. Coming in, and kind of what was that like?
Yeah.
Boy, yeah, it was. There's a lot to it. So first of all, you have to understand that, like, when you come fresh out of seminary, you have a lot of academic knowledge, but you don't have a lot of common sense. And I don't mean that in a real negative way, but what I mean, and I don't mean like common sense, like street smarts kind of thing. Like, some guys have better street smarts than others. I'm not talking about that, but like you just don't understand how people work. And it's a
Yeah.
weird thing. It's a really weird thing. But like people are, I mean, they're awesome and they're neat and they're unique and all of that kind of fun, exciting stuff. But like you can find yourself making a mess out of things because you don't understand how groups and group and how people in general can think about things, how they can take things. And so you end up, at least early on, at least I did, kind of walking my way into a lot of messes that I didn't realize I was making. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a way to give you an example. And I don't really have one. Maybe I'm blocking them out because they're too embarrassing to tell.
I get what you mean, though, because I mean, I've definitely done that too, where, like, I didn't realize what I was doing was upsetting someone, or or caused a chain reaction that
Yeah.
and now I have a little more idea. And sometimes people will say stuff like, "Oh, you don't need to worry about that," and I'm like, "Oh no, I definitely do," because I've had it happen or whatever. But
Yeah. I mean, again, look, I remember when I first got to St. Mark's in Wausau, probably that first year, I spent a lot of time just thinking, man, Pastor Bruce is really, because he was my senior pastor. And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't think he's doing this right. And then like years and years later, I would find myself doing the same thing going, oh, that's why he did it like that. Okay, that makes sense now. And it's like, you know, and again, and again, that's just it. Like you find yourself kind of being a little critical, over things that you don't really understand.
Mhm.
And again, it's not because you're ignorant of theology. It's not because you're ignorant of books. It's because you're ignorant of how people in general can operate. And again, there's just no way you can't put that in the book. You can try, but by the time you write the book, it's going to be all different.
Right.
And different congregations function and act differently. And so,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
there was a lot of learning that kind of went along with a lot of that. But I was incredibly academic, and yeah, and I mean, it kind of comes with it. Like, so I was, kind of give you a little bit of kind of how things went.
Yeah.
So I got married right before my vicarage year,
Mhm.
and so I went on vicarage and did that. Vicarage is like your internship. And then
Mhm.
my last year of seminary, that's when I was working as a valet in St. Louis. I didn't work as a valet the year, the prior year. I only did it my fourth year. because I needed to make money and I needed to make as much as I could in a short amount of time. Books are expensive.
Yeah.
And you're getting ready to venture off and yada yada yada. So I'm just trying to make ends meet. And so I was working as a valet. Well, valet is a very unique job, and depending on where you go, things go differently. Like you can go to like a nightclub and you can be busy all night long. All night long, you will make bank. You will make money. People tip, and all that kind of great stuff. Or you can go to like a nice fancy restaurant. And like one of them that I worked at was called Niche, and Niche was in Soulard. I think they might even still be open. They were really, they had just made like some top 10 new restaurants magazine, something like that.
Oh,
And
wow,
so they were like booked up, like booked to the nines. But here's the thing, they were like seriously like a 3-4 star restaurant, and they were really nice. And so what people would do is people would come at 6 o'clock, and then they wouldn't leave until 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so from 6:30 to 10:30, from 6:30 to like at least 9:30, there was nothing to do.
Yeah.
They were all in there, and I had to be there just in case, because if somebody came out early, like I was there to go get their car. And so that was kind of the way it was. And so what I did, and by the way, I also worked at PF Chang's of all things, a Chinese restaurant.
Nice.
But anyway, but yeah, kind of the same deal. Like there was a lot of downtime, and I also worked in a place called American Place, which is no longer there. And that was in St. Louis. But I had a lot of downtime. And so what I did is I just started reading all my books. I didn't have a computer with a good enough battery, so I couldn't type.
Mm-hmm.
And I could do handwriting stuff, so I could write on paper, or I could just read books. And so I read, and it was really weird because, so in college, they give you a lot of books to read. In seminary, we were on a quarter system, and we would run through 3 quarters of the year during the normal school year, and then summertime was considered a quarter. And so we had 3 quarters, or trimesters, if you want to do it like that, but and not count summer, but quarter system basically. So we had 10 weeks, and so we got a crap ton of books, and I read all of them. Like I plowed through all of them because I was just sitting there waiting for people to show up for me to get their car, and I couldn't type because my computer didn't have a good enough battery. And so I just read and read and read and read. So by the time I got to my first call, they put me in charge of youth, and it was actually super funny because, like, I remember the first couple Bible classes I taught, and I started teaching, and I remember I was talking to one of the parents afterwards, and she was like, well, my son doesn't necessarily think you're real personable, but he does think you might be the smartest person he's ever run across. And again, that's not to say he didn't have smart people around him. He did. He had tons of smart people around him, but it was just like, it was just like, he asked a simple question, and I was like, well, let's talk about the laws of thermodynamics, shall we? Here, if you click on the board, and this is like, like that's every high schooler's dream right there.
Right. That's funny though, because I mean, it like kind of going back to like the situation you're in. That's like what a great situation that was kind of for you, that you could just like you had this extra time that you could just pour into that.
Yeah.
Not that, I mean, you're a smart guy. I mean, I think you would have still wanted to read the books or gone through it, but like you just had that time to like devote extra time to reading it and everything. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting. I remember reading through them, and then I taught myself Latin. That was actually when I taught myself Latin. I had a buddy who was a classics major at WashU, and so he knew Latin really, really well. And so I bought him a book, and I bought me a book, and I worked through the book, and I made him like look at my exercises and stuff. So he was like my distance teacher.
That's funny.
He was a great guy. He's actually my Greek tutor when I was in Seward, Nebraska.
Yeah.
But anyway, good guy. But yeah, so anyway, so basically my first years out of the gate were honestly, if I could go back and look at myself, I'd probably say I was very arrogant.
Yeah.
Not that I was unwilling to learn, but I think I was very much in the line that, I know the books have it right. They've got this stuff figured out. You just got to do what they say. And
Right.
there's a part of me that's still that way. And so I can be very frustrating sometimes when I'm like, hey, no, you don't know what you're talking about. This book has it down, man. This book's got it done. And
Yeah.
again, for what it's worth, a lot of times the book has done a lot of research, and it's important to actually pay attention to that research. But yeah, there are times whenever I can overdo it a little bit. And like I said, I find myself nowadays a lot of times looking back on some of the critiques that I had way back when and going, yeah, maybe I didn't know as much as I thought I did.
Right. Well, yeah, I find it, I mean, it's just interesting because that's a pretty hot topic, I think, of like people who are like, there's some places that they don't want to take people right out of seminary. But that's why I'm kind of intrigued by it, because, I think like you were a smart guy, and I feel like it was probably worth it to them to have you. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, you had a head pastor.
Yeah, I had a
kind of
senior
like
pastor.
Yeah, senior pastor. Yeah, so you had someone to kind of bounce off. If you didn't have one, which I know you don't, this is hypothetical, but if you didn't have one, do you feel like it would have gone differently?
Oh yeah, for sure it would have.
Yeah.
It would have. But I would also say I would have learned a lot faster.
Yeah.
Again, it's just like anything.
Thrown in the
deep end. I remember,
drowning in the flood.
Yeah. I remember when I was an associate pastor up there, and I remember there's a buddy of mine, and this was like, 3 or 4 years in, and he made some comment on Facebook, and it was something like, until you've preached the lectionary for a year, you don't know what it's like to really preach, and or something like that. And I think I've brought this comment up.
Yeah, I've heard you say this.
Because again, it's one of those comments that, like, at the time, I almost took offense at it, and then whenever I got here, and especially after Pastor Kevin left, and I actually was preaching like the full lectionary, I was like, oh my gosh, he was right. Like, I'm almost 10 years in, and I'm like, he's right.
Yeah.
I hate to admit that he was right, but he's right.
Yeah. But you had the, once you were in that environment, you could learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. It's just interesting. I don't know.
And so, yeah, I think a lot of guys that are coming out of seminary, and, the seminary does an awesome job, but again, they just need a little bit of grace. But at the same time, like, yeah, you got to be willing to learn, and you got to learn from books, but you also got to learn from people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excuse me.
All right. Well, I mean, do you want to move on to your next segment?
I got our segment. Not that one, but and now life and times of the saints. That's right. It's our newest segment, Life and Times of the Saints. Here we are today. All right. He wasn't a priest. He wasn't a prophet. I mean, good gracious, he wasn't even well educated, at least not by the standards of the day. He did what everyone did when they reached a certain age. He followed in his dad's footsteps, taking on the job that in many ways defined him. His dad wasn't a prince, and yet in many ways that was going to be his title before it was all over. However, it certainly didn't start that way, and it certainly took a lot of time. Yes, like so many hero stories, this prince had a life of ups and downs, times of great joy and boldness, and also times of meekness, times when he really shouldn't have said anything at all, and yet said it all the same. Reading through his biography, you would truly get it all. You would get metaphor, you would get weapons and battle, you would get struggle and defeat. Yes, the prince got it all, and then some. The story really starts with a young man working for his dad. He was called to do that same task, but in a different way. His life was turned upside down, but on he went. At times throughout the next several years, his boldness would both make him a highlight to look at, but also cause him shame and embarrassment. On the one hand, some of the things he said were among the best and greatest statements to make. On the other hand, at times his statements were to be thrown down and abandoned. Was his life right side up or upside down? There are simply too many elements to keep in check. In oh so many ways, it was right side up, but even being right side up, sometimes it was being upside down. When you think of a rock, you don't usually think of things like upside down or right side up, but in spite of himself, this prince, this rock, was both. His life is filled with so much. You might say he got sifted like wheat at the hands of the Prince of Darkness, or you might say he tried to cut someone's head off only to miss and hit the ear. Yet this prince of the apostles, this rock of the church, started off by going fishing and ended up by hanging upside down. If you haven't figured it out just yet, it's none other than Simon, who is called Peter, who started out working for his father fishing. It was a job, and it was his job. It meant that he did not continue on in his education as many did back then, but then he was called to be a fisher of men, and everything changed. Peter's boldness is oftentimes is something to be looked upon. At times it meant he stood boldly on his Lord's words. Other times it was the Lord who was telling him to get behind him. Peter walked on water and sank. On the night Jesus was betrayed, Jesus says that Satan wanted to sift him like wheat, yet Peter's faith held strong. He failed. He failed boldly in so many times. And yet Jesus was the one after the resurrection to ask if Peter loved him. And Peter said that he did. He preached on. He preached on Pentecost Day, and many people consider him the first pope, but that's a whole other conversation. In the end, church legend says that when the time came for him to be put to death, he refused to be hung on a cross like Jesus. So they hung him upside down as they put him to death. All right, and that ends. And now, life and times of the saints.
Very nice.
Yeah, not my favorite one that I've ever written. So just in case you're wondering, we've actually gone past this one. So I always try to find, because I kind of do this in a mystery style, I always try to find one that's like a little bit more well known, I guess I might say.
Yeah.
And so June 29th was Peter, and June 30th was Paul. And so I kind of had quite the choice. So I decided to go with Peter. And so that's what we did. The book recommended eating fish.
Very nice.
On June 29th, eat fish. Now, I did not eat fish, but that was what the book recommended, eating fish, because he was a fisher of men. There you go. They also had a drink, but I forgot to write it down, and if I'm honest, it didn't look very delicious. So I won't go with that one. I will say this. Now, here's a fun story, though. And this was a week, I guess, just over a week ago on June 24th. June 24th is the celebration of St. John the Baptist. And I did not realize this, but like there's like a whole lot of traditions that go with that. And including the day before, like the eve of St. John the Baptist Day, is like Johnmas. And yeah, it's called Johnmas. So there there's a lot of traditions that kind of go with it, including and this is the one I actually went with, is the creation of empanadas. Now, if you don't know what an empanada
I didn't know that.
An empanada is like a Spanish hot pocket.
Wow.
But yeah, and it's I forget the connection. Actually, I don't know if there is one. They just said like, this is traditional. This is what you do. And I'm like, okay. Like, so I made empanadas.
That's a good meal.
Yeah. It was good, actually. It was very good. but yeah, so it was like there's just like all these things that you could do with Johnmas and all this stuff, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like yeah. So all with Saint John the Baptist, and then June 29th and is Peter, and June 30th is Saint Paul. So there you go. Go back in time and eat fish, or just eat fish now and say, hey, you're celebrating late. It's all good. Um, anyway, but and again, the reason I did that was because I looked at the saints for today and it was like, there's no way, nobody knew any of them. I didn't know any of them until I started reading. So
Yeah.
so I was like, nobody would get these. So I didn't. I mean, I might do a few of those in the future, but again, those aren't really mysteries because nobody knows anything about them. So I think these are a little bit more fun. But I will say I struggled to write this one a little bit. I don't know if you noticed, it was a little jagged. I was like kind of all over the place a little bit.
I don't know. I feel like Peter's kind of a relatable saint.
Yeah.
For most people. So I don't know. I mean, I was intrigued, personally. Cause I feel like, as we say, we're not, this whole episode is just about how Christians aren't perfect, I guess. I don't know. But,
the Christians aren't perfect episode.
Yeah. And, I mean, he just, he, as much as we all, I think, want to believe like, oh, I wouldn't, do that.
Yeah.
I would be, I mean, I can't say that for sure. Yeah. I kind of feel like maybe I probably would be like him in a lot of ways. So,
I think that's actually, that's one of the things that's been, again, you're talking about like getting older and all this stuff and this kind of this knowledge that you learn. And I will honestly say that is something that has been both eye-opening and scary to me. Like, you read these Bible stories, as biblical stories, and you always want to be like, yeah, I would be like that. Yeah, I'd be the hero. Yeah, I would do the right thing. And then the more you research and the more you study, the more you kind of end up going, I don't know if I would be that guy. Like, I want to say I would be. I remember when I was in Israel and we were looking at like the wilderness and we were talking about like, how they sent the 12 spies in and they came back and Joshua and Nun was one of them. And he's like, yeah, let's go after them. Like, we're the promised land. It's ours. God gave it to us. And like, and his buddy was that way. But then like the other 10 were like, yeah, no, they're all bigger than us and all. And it's like when you read that story, you're like, yeah, man, I'd be right there with Joshua. I'd be like, yeah. But then when you get older, it's like what the 10 were saying makes a lot of sense. And, you're just kind of going, yeah, I get it. I don't know if I would have been with Joshua. And I mean, obviously reading the Bible in hindsight, you're like, well, that's awful. That's not the right move. And absolutely right. God gave them into their hands. They should have done what God commanded. But at the same time, it's like you're going into a land and all these people seem well fed. They seem bigger than you. They're stronger than you. They're more battle ready than you. And oh, by the way, if they happen to kill you, guess what? They're going to take over your wife and kids. And it's like, I think about my children. I think about all that. And I'm just like, I don't know if I could do it. I just, it'd be really hard. And it would be really hard to be with Joshua. And I think I would look at Joshua and go, you're just a young pipsqueak. You just don't get it. And it was like, I would be wrong. I would be absolutely wrong. But at the same time, I find and again, when you start reading through biblical stories, it also brings into context, like just how bold some of these people really were. Like when you can start looking at the other side and going, yeah, I would definitely not be on that side. You can go, oh, wow. Yeah, that person was actually really bold. Like, and Peter's a great example because like how many times does Peter like jump and then look down and go, oh yeah, oops, and it's like, I don't know, you're talking to Jesus. I don't know if I could be that bold, but he did. Yeah. He's like, I'm going to jump. I'm going to do this.
That's what I think one thing that hit me with reality was I've made this joke to you before. I don't know if I've done it on the podcast. Is like the whole story of Judas, how Judas says, we shouldn't be wasting the perfume on like washing feet. He's like, this should be given to like poor people or something. And that was like when someone, read that, for one of the readings or something. And I just remember sitting there going, I'm kind of on his side, which is not good, but I know that's my first reaction,
Yeah.
and that's not good, but it's like, it just, I don't know. I think you get older and you start to realize that you're not, you start seeing those side of those things.
Yeah.
And when you're young, you just be like, oh man, I would never question Jesus. If he did it, there was a reason for it. And it's like, yeah, but Judas has a point, I think.
Yeah.
that, again, I kind of understand.
I think though, I think the other part of that though is also a good thing. And that is to say, it's almost like whenever you get to that point and you start realizing that, it's like the Bible actually opens up to a whole other level that you didn't even know was there. Like, again, because you're looking at, here you are, reading Judas and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm like actually kind of on his side a little bit. That's not where I want to be. And then all of a sudden you get to respect those other people that are involved all the more for seeing clearly, when even you realize like you might not have been seeing clearly. Like, you couldn't really see this for what it was. And yet some of these guys actually were. And again, I don't want to say all of them were. Some of them were really confused. Obviously Jesus wasn't, but some of the guys saw clearly, some of them didn't. So you can kind of look at it and kind of go, oh, wow. Yeah, I get to actually look at this from a whole new angle now that I flat out couldn't see as a younger person. And again, it's not that I didn't want to see. I literally could not see it because it didn't make any sense to me.
And we didn't have the experience.
Yeah, it's true. But again, this is why I always say the Bible is for all ages, because you get something out of it from every single age. And the older you get, the more you read it. Even if you're reading the same story again, it can hit you just a little bit different. And all of a sudden you can find yourself learning so much more from reading the same story over again. So,
yeah,
absolutely. All right. Now, are we ready for the thing? The other thing?
I think so.
Okay. I'm going to hit a button and hope it's the right one.
Okay.
To our last segment, probably.
All right. Are we ready for church chatter? Oh, we got it. I really need to cut that last part of that. But I almost don't want to at this point. It's like a staple of the show.
People expect it.
Yeah. People expect it now. Anyway, we've reached kind of the calm period of the summer. Happens every year, but as it goes, as calm as it might seem, it's really not calm. We got the CID convention coming up on the 13th to the 15th, and then I go with 9 other youth and 1 other adult leader starting on July 17th. We're going to be heading down to New Orleans for the National Youth Gathering, which happens every 3 years. And so we're kind of looking forward to that. The theme this year is Endure, and it's based on a Hebrews passage. We've been doing a pre-gathering study with them and the high school kids every week in the high school Bible class room. So anyway, those are kind of like the big events going on. I mean, obviously we got other things. We got the fish fry coming up, which is like an all-you-can-eat fish fry. I don't know where to direct you to take. I mean, look, call the church office. If you want tickets, call the church office. We'll figure it out. But honestly, if you're at church, they sell them in the welcome center at times and yada, yada, yada. But anyway, just get an opportunity. If you can go, I can't make it because I'll be at the youth gathering, but I was there last year and it was phenomenal. It was good stuff. Hey, we were just talking about St. Peter and St. Paul and St. Peter and Fish Day.
There you go.
If you have to wait till July 18th, I get it. You just have to wait till July 18th and you got to think of St. Peter while you eat unlimited fried fish.
Unlimited fried fish.
Look, they're going to have other things there too. Just bypass all of it. Not that it's not good. It's fabulous. But just bypass all of it and eat more fried fish.
That's, there's something to me about an unlimited fish fry that just sounds so good.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what it is. It's the fried fish, but it's like, it just sounds so amazing.
And it sounds like pain too at the same time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's probably not. Yeah. But
you're like, it's going to be so good and then it's going to hurt so bad.
As long as you have self-control, which I do not. So
I was going to say, I don't.
Yeah, that's one of my problems. But it's sounds so good though.
All right. So those are kind of like the big things going on around Sam Prairie. What's going on around in your neck of the woods?
We got VBS coming up here pretty soon.
Oh yeah, and you got a band too, right?
Yeah,
What's your
I got a
name?
band. Oh, Chris, this is as most people would say, this is the experience. We're talking about ARCs, having the experience.
Yeah.
Now this is what happened. Is one of the girls of the band said, like, I was like, no, she came up with the name Soggy Waffles, like the whole never eat soggy waffles to remember the compass thing. And then she wasn't at the last rehearsal. And I said, if you guys can come up with a better name than Soggy Waffles, go for it.
Yeah.
But if it's not a good name, then no, and no one came up with a name. So then the next rehearsal, that girl was there, and I go, well, yeah, because you came up with Soggy Waffles. She goes, well, I said the thing, but you said that would make a good band name. So it was your idea. And I was like, it was? So I'm like, okay, if people want to change the name,
yes,
this is your band. You can change the name, but you guys got to figure it out, and everybody has to have a say. You can't just decide four people get to pick it. So we're in the midst of band drama.
Oh, band drama. So you still don't have a name, but it very well might be the Soggy Waffle.
Yeah, maybe.
The Soggy Waffle is pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie.
I think it's great. Plus, I'm like, you know how awesome that could be? Like a compass, but the outside of the compass is like a waffle texture.
Yeah.
And then, it's like upside down, so you can have Soggy Waffles as like the top of it or whatever. Like, I'm like, it just writes itself,
It just writes itself.
But it's the junior high group, and I want them to love their name. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Fair enough. Well, that's awesome. So is that next week then?
It's it's the 13th. So
okay. So when I'm at the CID convention, you're going to be VBSing it up.
Yes, we are.
Right on.
It's going to be good. Regardless of the band name, it's going to be good. It's going to be a good time.
All right. Well, it sounds good. Sounds fantastic. All right.
Yeah. So we're cruising along. So that'll be it. We're going to be making another call here pretty soon.
Yeah.
So we're trucking along. That's hopefully, but our VBS was really great last year. And I actually was telling people this year that we had a family who played in the daughter played in the band, and they actually went to a Lutheran or Missouri Synod church, so they were already in the denomination, all that stuff.
Yeah,
but they just said, they kind of said like, well, we kind of go to a place that's far away. We don't really end up going very often because it's kind of a drive, and we're not really very plugged in. And they kind of said, honestly, like most people don't even know our names, like we don't really, and they started coming to our church after doing the band, and now they're plugged in. Their two daughters are doing, and oh shoot, I'm going to forget the name of it, but they're lighting the candles and yeah. So they're getting involved, and it's like this is it's nice to see, and not that that's the necessarily main goal of like recruiting people, but it's just. It's nice to see something kind of happening with it.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
Hopefully this next year we'll see what it inspires. So
sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Fantastic. All right. Anything else going on over that way?
No, that's pretty much it. I think we're pretty much settled. Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, everybody, I don't know what the future holds. Being in summer, I don't know how often we're going to be able to do this. I hope we'll be meeting again next week, but for another episode, but honestly, the way this summer has gone, I just don't know.
I know. We were talking about that before we started, that it's like, why is summer more hectic than like, and we were talking about how when we were kids, it was like summer was nothing. I didn't do anything.
My dad just maybe jobs, man.
Yeah. It was like you worked. I would like do stuff around the house.
Yeah.
Or, or I would play like one sport maybe.
Yeah.
which would be like maybe 2 days a week we'd practice or something, and then like a game on the weekend every other week or something. But it's like, man, it's like everybody is so busy all the time. It's just nuts.
Yeah. So anyway, so we'll see what happens, but hopefully we get another episode in the coming weeks, especially before the youth gathering. So anyway, but thanks for joining us today, tonight, whenever it happens to be. God's blessings to all of you. Bye.
Bye.